Can you hear me?
All right. Hey, everybody. We are live here. I'm sure people will be rolling in and joining. Thank you so much for coming to this session today. We'll get started in a second and have some of our speakers start doing intros. But anyone who is joining, feel free to share who you are, where you're joining from, and especially if you have any problems or tech needs in particular that you're excited to hear more about from this panel of experts, please drop it into the chat. I'll give a quick overview and logistics, and we'll get right to our speakers. So I'm Mitch. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Pond. Pond is a marketplace for all the tools and services you need for your nonprofit. You'll get a $50 credit just for attending this webinar, so make sure you fill our survey out at the end so we know you were here. We have an amazing group here today. And one thing I'll flag before they give their intros is that none of them are affiliated with a specific provider or company. So you're getting great unbiased feedback from people that work with tons of different products and platforms. So feel free to share. It's a safe space, and we're excited to tackle all those pesky tech issues. So without further ado, I'll go around the room and have everybody share, introduce yourself, your areas of expertise, and if you could share a few layers of your identity that are most important to you, that'd be awesome. And Maureen, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I knew you were going to pick me first, Mitch. Hey, everyone. My name is Maureen Walbioff. I'm a nonprofit digital strategist and technology coach. I have a solo consulting practice, and my whole passion, as it turns out, in my work life, is to help nonprofit teams make really good decisions about all of this complicated technology stuff. I'm lucky enough to be based in Massachusetts, out on beautiful Cape Cod. So a couple of layers of my identity are beach bum when possible, number one. Number two, I am an accidental techie. I was not formally trained to do any of this stuff. I Google my way through life and figure things out as I go. And I'm really excited about participating in the panel today.
Awesome. Tristan, could you go next, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Tristan Penn. I am Senior Manager of Equity and Accountability at N10. And let's see here. We are an organization that is a capacity building organization for other nonprofits in the tech sector, in and out of the tech sector. And I'm really excited to join fellow accidental techies, fellow folks in and near adjacent to the nonprofit sector to share what we have with you all, and hopefully, learn some things from you all as well. Some things that for me that are most important to me in terms of identity is I am originally from Kansas, so I have like a soft spot for like the Midwest and everything, all things Midwest. Half Black, half Navajo man, and I am based in Portland, which is also Multnomah and Clackamas land. Happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Mark, could you go next? Oh, Mark, we can't hear you. Maybe we'll go to Erica. We'll come back to you.
Hi, really nice to be here today and with this great panel of fellow nonprofit techies. I am Erica Blake. I'm a senior consultant with Tech Impact. We are a nonprofit that works with lots of different nonprofits on all kinds of technology projects, strategy, education. I also come through to nonprofit tech accidentally. I am like a data nerd by way of social sciences. I am an urbanist. I am a live music enthusiast. And yeah, I think that those are some different layers of my identity here.
Awesome. Mark, are we back on?
Let's try it. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, you're good.
All right. Look how great I am with technology. I'm glad I'm here in this session to learn something today. Hi, everyone. Founding partner of Cathexis Partners. Started it about 13 years ago now. Originally from Chicago. We've always been virtually before it was cool. but now I'm down here in Celebration, Florida. But we help nonprofits find and use technology. So RFP selections, to design projects, really the full gamut. But really happy to join this really smart group of people today.
Awesome. All right. Without further ado, we're going to dive in. We have tons to cover. Before we start talking about tech selection, I think people try to skip to that step. And there's a lot of important things to assess beforehand. And I already see Maureen nodding at me. Is a new tool the answer? Like, how do you just start diagnosing your problem? And Maureen, we're going to start with you because I know you were anxious to get at this one.
Please don't start with the demo, and then peace out. I could just leave this panel right now. Don't start with the demo. It's so tempting to get a look. It's like test driving a car. I want to look, I want to see what it feels like. If you start with the demos, you're skipping two really important steps. The first is to determine whether a new system is actually going to fix the problems that you're experiencing. Truly, sometimes you've outgrown a system or it was never the right one to begin with, and a move is definitely the answer. But often enough, people have not been properly trained, never invested in training. So of course, this tool is going to feel clunky. The problem is with your business processes or the number of staff you have or how updated your systems are. So please start with figuring out what your problem and pain points really are, what's causing them, figure out your requirements, what do we need and why, and then you're empowered to go have a demo that's actually going to be helpful and meaningful in your decision-making process.
So true. Tristan or Mark or Erica, anything to add there?
Yeah. Obviously ditto to all those things. I think that's such a great starting point, Maureen, for me. And it gets my mind really thinking and sinking into past experiences where I've been in the nonprofit and they're like, we got this thing donated, neat, here, go, bless and release it into the wild of the organization. And all of us are sitting there and we're like, we weren't trained for it. So call back to what you were saying, Maureen, we weren't trained for it. And now we're kind of clunky in how we're implementing it. And not only clunky, we're not utilizing the tool in a way that best serves the tool, but more importantly, what also best serves the organization, right? And so I think what's really important and what we've heard at N10 and from folks at nonprofits is that, sometimes new is not better, and that nice shiny tool, when Maureen was saying oh, it's so tempting to drive that shiny car. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of self-control, organizational self-control, to be able to pause in that parking lot or that dealership of new tools and kind of assess the situation, assess the financials, and also build a plan. So if you are going to bring a tool in, making sure that you are able to hold it and hold the training and professional development that comes with it too. And too often, I think that I fell victim to it lots of times, but I've also seen colleagues of mine through the years, in my 18 years in nonprofit, fall into that same trap. And so I think the bigger thing is assessing where your training and professional development gaps are currently before you start considering new tools.
Yeah, and Erica, I hear this come up so often where people are like, actually what we need is more training. But I can imagine if I'm not a tech savvy manager, how do I know what training people need? How do you advise leaders to even sort out the training that's going to be most effective?
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with a nonprofit representative this morning who was saying, we just need more training. And how do I get more training in platform A? And it's you could go learn the general, sort of processes or language or how to do things in that system or in that platform. However, if you don't know your own business process and how you're going to do that and what you're trying to solve and what you're trying to learn, and you haven't learned that and documented it or passed it down through different staff effectively, it's going to be, I just think that that's the training that is often missing. And a nonprofit technologist, consultant is not going to really be able to help you. They can help you like flesh that out, but they can't write your business process manual and how you are going to use that system. They can like help you, but they can and point you in the right direction, but they're not going to say you're doing this because your process starts this way. So I would say there's technical training, and then there's like how the organization, how the different staff and their roles are going to use that tool and evolve that tool. And so, there's a couple different areas for training there.
Yeah, and I think what you just mentioned too is it could come across sort of scary, like actually there's a lot you need to do, but it's really empowering. It's like you don't actually need to get started. You don't need an outside consultant. The important first steps are in your control of clarifying your process and your goals, and it's going to set you up better to work with someone externally. Mark, I would be curious, in your experience, oftentimes what I hear when people are ready for a tech change, they're like, yeah, but I can't get my team on board. No one wants to change. How do you get, like, before you even start searching for a tool, how do you get the consensus on board? What's the right way to start change managing before you even picked something to change to?
It's a great question. And then plus with the great resignation and just all the different people leaving and starting new roles, right? They'll come into a new shop and say, I don't like any of the tools they're using here. I want to change everything. It's like, well, wait a second. First of all, make sure change is right. And, and what needs to change? Is it your way of doing things and the tools you've used to do that? Or, is this truly something that needs to be updated? And that's a decision that has to be made by the team, right? And that's where a consultant can help, kind of that third party, Switzerland type of, hey, let's just get this straight. Is everybody on the same page? What's working, what's not working, and make those decisions before you go anywhere. And if you can't get everybody around a table, even virtually, and nodding at the same time, then you have to unpack that even further before you go anywhere. Otherwise, you're just going to be throwing money at something and not really solving the problem.
Yeah, and another thing that I think comes up before people jump into the tech search is, we've already got 20, you get this like sprawling list of SaaS tools, especially on a growing team. Different people have preferences. Someone's using Slack, someone uses, and all these different tools. Maureen, how do you advise people to start off kind of like taming? I've heard you say taming the mess before. Mm-hmm. Can you just talk a little bit about why that's an important step before the tech search happens?
Sure. And if you're nodding in recognition, you have a lot of company because everybody's got stuff. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. The event team needs an event tool that can do ABC. Here it comes, bolt it on or not. So the first thing I would do is take an inventory. I would literally write down everything you have, what it's used for, how much it costs. And if you want to get super fancy, grade it. It's an A, it's a B, it's a C, it's an F. Get it out of here. And that's where you start to identify redundancies. We have too many email tools and each team is kind of using their own, bad, not optimal, let's say, or gaps. We've been talking about doing peer-to-peer fundraising for 3 years. None of our current systems do it. What's our plan going to be? So understanding what you have, your satisfaction with it, where the gaps and redundancies are, and then think about your data flow too, right? Like how's info moving or not moving between all of these pieces? I think we've all grown up with nonprofit technology being very team-based. The fundraising team uses this. The comms team uses that. It's much better from an organizational perspective and a collaboration perspective for you to look at it as an entire ecosystem. How's this all work together? And does it? Ask yourselves that question and start to make technology decisions collaboratively, not in a vacuum, just the fundraisers. It affects other people in your organization most of the time when you make a tech change. So open up the room, have those conversations, and walk forward as a group with the best interests of your organizational goals as your North Star, instead of just what I need in my volunteer team.
Yeah, and Maureen, the stuff you just walked through actually goes really well with what Mark said about getting the team on board, because I think people feeling heard as a starting point is really good. And this exercise of doing the audit as a team is really good, because someone might be like, oh, I hate that tool, but they hear the other person's reason for using it. And then they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You're just getting everybody on the same page. And I just think that is so important for that change management. All right, so now we've done all the homework and the pre-work when it comes to the actual search and the shopping process. I've heard so many people complain to me about, oh, I've spent 90 hours looking at different tools and it's just overwhelming and I don't know what we need. When it comes to starting off the actual search process and evaluation, Erica, what have you seen be most effective and save people time and not get totally burnt out before they even pick something?
I think like Maureen was saying, kind of getting the right people in the room and talking about like what the goals are and what, assessing or doing that survey of what tools are in use by which teams for which purposes, and then identifying where there could be consolidation and where things can get the boot, and like, what is the goal? What are we trying to replace here? Are we trying to replace two different systems that are easily solved in one? Or are we trying to do, we trying to actually separate two different systems? It's like, these things shouldn't really be together. They're like sort of in a general system that doesn't really solve either specific teams or need, processes. It's like, that's one thing that I would do. The other like starting point that I like to include, and it goes back to something we were talking about before, is like include the current system in your assessment. So like at least the benchmark. Like, does it do all of these things terribly, or have we just not explored this one module, and might it be worth some more like technical or training investment in exploring that thing? It should be on the table somewhere, just so we're comparing what are some, are we moving in a better direction by, including this software or this SaaS platform or another.
Mark, what have you seen be most effective to prevent the like pulling your hair out scenario of people that start on this journey?
Yeah, you really have to have a lot of kind of combining what we've talked about already, right? Making sure you have your list of requirements and the nice to haves, make sure everybody's in agreement before you go out there and start shopping. Talking to your peers and your different community groups, and just reaching out to folks that are using platforms and software that you think visually, if it's something you can look at versus a database, hey, I really like what you're doing there. What are you using? If it's not obvious, asking them, hey, what works, what doesn't. And really, once you have all those requirements together and the nice to haves, make sure you have a script going into the demo. I might be getting a bit ahead here, but make sure that you kind of share that with all the different vendors involved, so that they know what they need to cover and how much time they have to do it. Because demos are awful, right? And I mean, this is why my hair is this color, because I sit through so many of them and they're just dreadful. But they're a means to an end. So you want to make them as efficient as possible. An hour and a half, 2 hours, it's going to be gone like that. Most times 15, 20 minutes gets, wasted in just introductions. And then you have little time for Q&A and actually getting where you need to go through. So you really want to go in there with a plan, make sure people stick to it. And then you'll probably have a follow-up to that demo if they're really in the final list, of selections. So you really have to go in with a game plan. Otherwise, you're just going to spend 90 plus hours and have nothing accomplished.
Yeah, two things I just want to double down on there, Mark, that you mentioned. One is that you have your questions from everybody beforehand, because that's something I've seen a lot of, is it becomes like a ping pong game where you're like, well, I tuned the demo, oh, but I didn't ask that question, and so now needs to see it, and it just is making its way around the team, and that makes it ever more painful. And the other thing that I think is really good is recording, so that you can just make sure every single time it's recorded and you've got all the questions asked, so you're being efficient with everyone's time on the team. One thing that I hear from a lot of people too, Maureen, is like, oh, they've got a really good salesperson. It almost feels like you're like you're in like a battle with this really good salesperson. How do you make sure that you remain in control and that it's like addressing the things you're focused on and you're not falling into the really good salesperson trap?
Yeah. They're good at their jobs for a reason, or they're not there for very long is usually what happens, right? So I always suggest no more than 4 demos, like narrow it down. 3 is great. 4 is okay. 5, too many. A lot of these systems do a lot of the same things. When it comes to working with salespeople, I try to send a lot of background information first, maybe that inventory, maybe priorities that we've got, functionality requirements, budget, stuff like that. How many users, how many records do I have? So that I'm giving the salesperson enough information for them to do a good job at their jobs. And have a pre-demo conversation with them, have a sales meeting with them where they can ask you a bunch of questions, you can ask them a bunch of questions before you even schedule the demo. If it doesn't go well, don't bother looking at that product. I have often also found recently, which I'm so glad to see, that sales folks are being much more candid, transparent, whatever word you want to use. If it's not going to be a good fit for one reason or another, they're actually saying we're probably not the product for you. So we're going to back away from this opportunity. And I love seeing that. Nobody wants to sell someone something that is going to be a poor fit for them. So the salesperson is going to follow your lead. It is their sales cycle, sure, but it's your search process. So be really clear about who you're talking to, when you're going to do what. You're going to get questions from me 2 days after the demo. Do not contact me in between. I know where to find you and I will be in touch. And I think that's the thing that makes nonprofits feel like they need to be very self-protective and withhold a lot of information that could be useful, because they're an uninformed consumer and I've got a very informed salesperson. So equalize it, equalize your roles. You're leading it. They're working in service of you and your process. And just be pleasantly persistent. If somebody's calling you 16 times, not that anyone here would do that. If you're feeling like here they come again, like you look at the phone and you know that number, just be really clear that you'll be in touch when you're ready to be in touch. And hopefully a good salesperson will respect that.
Yeah, and we just got a really good question in the chat from Ashley. Hey, Ashley, great to see you again. And just oftentimes that information to do the narrowing down isn't so readily available. Maureen, I don't know if you have thoughts on that or others on her question as well.
Let's let somebody else answer that one.
Sure.
There's definitely sites like G2 that can help with some product overviews, right? And there's some searching that you can do. But, I don't want to make it a plug, but never hurts to just give folks like us a call, and third parties that can give you the lowdown. I'm happy to have a chat or answer any questions, just have a half-hour call and just talk about the basics. I mean, if you want to get into the whole RFP process, that's unpacking a larger thing. But as far as, functionalities, definitely even on our websites, a lot of other websites also have some kind of comparison guides. So there are some different options out there.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple things, Ashley. One, at least on Pond, we try to have all of our providers show a video within their profile just so that you can get a first look and get a little bit more information. And there's a few sites that provide that kind of like you can do your own demo on your own time. And then I know several of the folks here have good comparison resources, and we'll be sure to include those. I know specifically Catexis and Tech Impact have some good kind of like state of the market scanning different products for different categories. So we will link all of those in the recap, Ashley, and make sure that you have that too. Thank you so much for the question. One other thing I was going to bring up just on this kind of like evaluation process, Tristan, that I'd love to get your view on is are there red flags, especially when it comes to like values alignment of this company, this vendor being the right ongoing partner for us, more so than just checking off a list of product functionality? Do you have any suggestions there?
Yeah, thanks. I think for me, one of the red flags is if you have someone similar to what Maureen was saying, you are in the driver's seat of this process. And I think one big red flag is if you meet resistance in that, or you feel like you're getting rushed. You are on your own timeline and you are the master of that timeline, and you're able to change it, slow it down, stop it, or like completely bail. And that is, I think that's the biggest thing that like, I used to work in youth development too. And I used to tell younger kids too, like that belly buzzer, where you're like, I can't really name what this is, but this doesn't feel right. And I think a lot of times organizationally, people will have those belly buzzers come up, but everyone's kind of too afraid to say the thing. And so a lot of times, if you're a good project manager, you should be able to tap into that collective belly buzzer or tap into your own and get a temperature check with your team. And I think that's the biggest thing too, across all of this is like what Erica was saying earlier is like knowing your process and also knowing your process, but also like knowing your team, knowing yourself organizationally too, and the people that are going to be a part of this process, both minimally and like to a larger scale as well. And I think, back to your original question, Mitch, of like references too, something you can do, like, yes, you can know yourself. That is a thing that you should do and know, but and recognize those like belly buzzer moments, but also the external red flags of those are very plainly, if someone or a salesperson isn't providing you references or another nonprofit with which for you to reach out to say, hey, other nonprofit here, how are you implementing this tool? How are you utilizing it? What are the hiccups that have come up along the way? What are the barriers that have come up along the way? How has your training process gone while you've implemented this tool? Like, what a great resource to be able to tap into references. And if people and sales folks aren't able to provide not one to like, at least 2 to 3 references, because we all know sometimes tools aren't made equally. And sometimes tools aren't made for nonprofits, and that's going to get glazed over at times too. So having a good, strong set of questions, yes, and also making sure that you are getting those references. You are the person that is trying to get wooed. And if you cannot get or they can't like procure references for you, that's a problem and that's a red flag. And that's something that is a deal breaker for me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, something else that I've come across too is promises about functionality, or like, oh yeah, that's going to be available next week. Someone says it's going to be available soon, you just assume that it's not in that product. Like that can't be a part. As someone who is building and growing a tech product, those timelines change constantly, and it is really hard to manage against. If you can't touch and feel or taste the functionality that is critical to you, you cannot be betting on it being available soon. Mark, have you had anything you see regularly that is like, this is a non-starter for me?
Yeah, both those things, references for sure. And I would say, with time permitting, definitely look at their example that they'll probably send you as part of the process. And outside of the references, talk to people that maybe their examples, or talk to, again, your peer group and get their feedback for the non-references. Because if they can't even give you 3 references, I agree, just forget about them. But if they, unless they're brand new, and then you better get a great deal because you're part of their beta testing. But you want to definitely really check with your peers and find out why they went with them or what they're doing, or even find a lot of times during an RFP process will be very interesting, because different vendors will reference the same clients, not even knowing that they're leaving or possibly using their competitors as well. So those are the people you really want to talk to, and that's where you'll get some of the true stories.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here to say the best way to get references, aside from the fact that you're going to get hopefully some hand-picked references. It's like references for a job. This person better say something nice about my product. It is not random.
Right.
You're getting a very happy client usually. Look on their websites. What clients are they listing? What case studies do they have? And then go to those organizations' websites and see if they're actually even using those products. You know, often I'll find organization A listed on a software vendor's site. I go over to the actual website. I'm like, checking donation forms, checking things like that. And I can tell in the URL often what's powering, or the logo for the company is on the donation form. Sometimes what's listed on the website is not always what is actually being used. And when you find somebody who's really using that system, grab their fundraising contact information and reach out. There's a lot of ways to gather information about people's experiences and products. And it's always a good idea, if you feel like sleuthing around a little bit, to come up with 1 or 2 references of your own as well.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add to that, Maureen, is to just also make sure that the reference is relevant to your situation. I've seen a lot of people who've been like, oh, well, last organization, or the organization down the street uses X, and it's like, do they have the same purpose for the tool as you? Are they do they have the same team size? Do they have the same objectives? Like, do they have some other tools it needs to integrate with? Like, there's a lot deeper questions, and I think a lot of people feel like they're not going to do the search well. So why would I spend a bunch of time on it? I heard a good suggestion and I'm just going to go with it. And I think people sell themselves short on what they really can achieve by themselves, and just being a little bit thoughtful to avoid some of those outcomes. I just wanted to touch on a comment that Simon made in the chat, which I think is really good to call out, in differentiating between the roadmap, not basing your decision, meaning like, there's a functionality coming out next month that is the reason I'm buying this product, but it is good to be aware of, like, where is this company going and what are their goals, and that you're aligned with them. I agree that it's a really good call out, Simon. Thanks for sharing that.
One thing I'd like to add to that, and I totally agree, Simon, if there is something, to Mitch's point, that they're saying, oh, it's going to be available next week, but it's not, but it's really important to your organization, and if you get that far down and they're really the tool other than this one thing, they can put it in the contract. And guess what? It'll have to be available next week.
And I would like to add too, I think, when you're getting, this is all done in this, like, with the assumption, we're talking about this under the assumption that, like, we're going through the vetting process. There's been a meeting that said, hey, we're looking for X product and we're going to follow this process. I want to also acknowledge that, like, this is not always the typical process in nonprofit world. I know a lot of times, in fact, the majority of times that I've, working in nonprofit, working at a Boys and Girls Club, working at a youth development organization, there has been a moment where a large company in the community has said, we're donating this thing, and thrusting it upon us, and us having to figure out how to saw off a puzzle piece corner in order for it to fit within us. And I think also, yes, this conversation is great, but also acknowledging that, like, we have the power, folks in nonprofit, when we're in these decisions, again, we're in the driver's seat, to be able to say, I'm going to bless, though it's a donated thing that we really want to have, because sometimes it's one of those situations where we are wanting something free, to add to it and not be a budgetary type of drawback. So I think that's something that needs to be acknowledged, because every process, I speak from experience, is not done with prudence or forethought.
Yeah, and it's a good point, Tristan, and I'd love to go back to something that Jeff mentioned, which is just a specific example which sounds similar, of, like, they've got free access to a tool and they're trying to figure it out, and they're bringing in volunteer consultants. I don't know, with the context of a specific example, if any of you have some advice for Jeff, or maybe we could workshop this situation a little bit.
I think, like, if it's a free type of tool that you're getting used, or you're getting, like, given, I think there's an element of, if you're getting this, if you're receiving it, being able to say, we have the capacity to receive this, but you also have to double down on the professional development and training, not only on the front end, not only on the middle, but also consistently through the process. And if that's not guaranteed, like the reality of nonprofits, it's going to fall off. And I think, I don't know if that answers like Jeff's question specifically, but I think that's like a good plus addition on to, getting free product.
Yeah, same thing with Salesforce, right? They give 10 free licenses, but it's, they'll be the first ones these days to say it's free like a puppy, right? You get those free licenses, but you've got to do a lot of maintenance and a lot of things to make it right for you.
Oh, that hits a little close to home, Mark. I've had 2 puppies at home for the past 6 months. Yeah. I'm feeling that one in my core.
So yep. Having a CRM, a free CRM is a lot like that. Less potty training involved, but otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, and on Jeff's that little question that we were just talking about, that the 5, Microsoft 365 fundraising CRM licenses, those licenses, that cost is actually not that expensive. Like, the free there is the free puppy, because the really expensive piece of what he's talking about is the integration that he's going to need, which is potentially custom integration that Microsoft is not going to do. They don't do that themselves. So you'd have to go to like an outside consultant to do that. So like, the licenses are free. Maybe that's a perk. How many licenses do you actually need? Do you need just 5? So it's just like there's significant expenses just in that proposal right there.
And something that you just brought up that I think would be really helpful for us to dig into more thoroughly is, what does it mean when you need a consultant? Like, how do you go about that search, defining the type of consultant you need? What's reasonable? Like, do different types of organizations need to think about that differently? Mark, if you want to maybe jump in on that first, but I'd love to hear from everybody, because I think this is a big thing that there's not enough guidance on. People usually just go to a consultant and then they start figuring it out.
Yeah, I think it's great for organizations, when they can, to, solve this and make their own choices without it. I'm not trying to promote our services when it comes. If you have everything you need and a team that works well together and can make those decisions, great. But when the consultant comes in the most handy, even when they're not the smartest guy in the room, and trust me, if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm leaving that room. I don't want to be there. But it's great to just be that, have that voice that's a third party, neutral person to say, kind of be just the referee in the conversations between the team itself and the vendors. It's a lot of different personalities, a lot of different needs, a lot of different perspectives, and we're the ones that can sit back and go, this is all great, all very important, now let's doodle through this, and that's where the consultant can be the most help, I think.
Yeah, can I jump in on this one? Mark, I loved everything you just said, like spot. Think about what kind of consultant you need, because if you're moving into a new system, often you need a consultant or an agency to actually set it up for you. Salesforce is a perfect example. Can you get your Trailhead certifications for free and know enough to be dangerous? Yeah, but that's not going to help you make good decisions about how your data needs to move from where it is now into a new CRM. So think about where you feel most nervous. I don't know anything about X, so I need to find somebody who can fill that knowledge gap for me, that I can build a trusting relationship with, whether they're a builder, developing your website, helping you figure out those business processes that Mark was talking about earlier. I do a lot of what I call translating and normalizing. So a vendor, software company says something very technical and very foreign, and I will take that information, I'll explain it in terms that anybody can understand, so it levels the playing field. If a nonprofit client of mine is nervous about something, vendor said X, what? We didn't expect that. I can normalize it, say, yeah, every product works like that. You're going to have to think about these things. Tristan mentioned the two magic words, project management, a couple of times in his answers. And I think that's where nonprofit staffers just don't have a lot of experience in running a technology project. So consultants can be very helpful figuring out together with your team and the software company who's doing what, when's it due, what order are we doing things in, does everybody understand what they're responsible for, do we all have the same picture in our head of what's going to happen when we sign this contract and hit the go button. So project management consultants can be helpful, and figure out where you've got that belly buzzer of Tristan's when you think about making a decision or moving, changing, where that worry is for you, and then try to find somebody who can help you decrease or eliminate that worry.
And Erica, when it comes to justifying, because cost is always a huge issue amongst organizations, where do you see people succeeding in justifying the investment in a consultant, be that to a boss or a board or a funder? How can you be more successful there?
Depending on the technical sophistication and like wherewithal and experience of the staff, which at a lot of nonprofits is not all that high. Or I mean, it depends, like it depends on the size of the nonprofit or the sector. But I think it's just going to be part of the technology budget. It's like, we don't have this expertise. You're probably not going to pay for one of our staff to become an expert, like be like sort of like end stage consultant, or like a varied experience, sort of internal consultant on this either process or project management or corralling the troops. Like, is the board going to pay for a staff member to do that? Like, I doubt it. And I think that the value add is that these consultants, or like a consultancy, is going to be able to do this. They do it all the time. They can do it effectively. They're going to be able to spend maybe 20 hours a month versus, but like the end is in 6 months. Whereas what would it take to like build that internal capacity in our organization? It's probably just not going to happen. And so if our overall, technology spend is going to be, we're investing in this new platform, we're investing in this training, but we're going to need somebody to like help us, do the translation that Maureen was talking about and hold our hands and make sure that it gets done. I just think it's part of the, it's just part of the budget.
And yeah. I would add to that too. Yes, it is like so important what Erica was saying with like, it's just a part of the budget too, now more than ever, right? So I think I hate to say this is like the sweet spot for like being able to like convince your boss, your board, that this is something that like we need to invest in. The majority of us we have the privilege of working from home. And part of that requires, like, I have this laptop right here, right now, and that is imperative to the work that I do, and I'm able to connect with other people. And if you can't like bridge that gap with your own board, it sounds like you have bad board members who aren't really having their ear to the ground with like, where the organization is at in terms of having to do that hard shift 2 years ago to technology, and how we've had to really not only lean on it, but put our full weight on it.
Yeah, and Tristan, I know you do full workshops on the topic of equity and tech selection and implementation, and you were touching on some of the points there, but I think this is a good time to also dig in on, and I know you don't have a full hour to do so, but when it comes to equitable decision making around your technology, what are some of the core components of that that go into that process for you?
Yeah, I think some of the core components in terms of making, equitable equipment processes, I think for me, again, a callback to the year that shall not be named, 2020, that like we all had to do that hard pivot of working from home. We had to take our laptops home. We had to take our desktops home. We had to take all the peripheries that come with it. And a lot of times, during that first, year of that, myself and Amy, our CEO, consistently were getting reached out to by community members to say, how do I navigate this? What is right? What is wrong? What is up? What is down? What is left? And what is right? And I think the bigger thing is, if you're going to be equitable in how you implement technology decisions, I think some big hallmark things are making sure that tech is accessible across the entire organization. It shouldn't be adhering to a hierarchy or your organizational hierarchy. Why is the C-suite or leadership team the only people that are able to work from home or have laptops? The entire organization should have laptops. There shouldn't be a bring your own device approach to how you're running the business. And I don't think that's fair. And I've seen that happen. And I've seen employees be like, or colleagues, former colleagues of mine, be like, I don't have the money to buy a laptop that's going to support the tools and services that I need to work from home. And that's so sad too, because at the end of the day, that impacts an organization's mission, its values, and where they want to go, not only during the pandemic, but into the future. And I think the other last piece I would say is making sure that you are, again, I can't say it enough, but like ensuring that you are providing stipends for like training, professional development, and also being able to acknowledge that the people that you're working with are people. They are humans that you have worked with, and they're going through a very, very hard time. We all are. And so being able to say, we're going to pay for your internet access because your internet access is key to our organization's mission. We're going to pay for your cell phone because we're calling you at all hours of the day. We're going to make sure that you have a very accommodating desk setup. And so it's very basic because it doesn't feel like technology. It doesn't have like the chip in it. It doesn't have, the spreadsheet that goes with it. It's a desk that just makes your back feel better. And so I think those are things that at the very, very basis of things, those are what need to happen in order to set the foundation, both literally and figuratively, for equitable access to technology.
Yeah, thank you, Tristan. That was spot on, super powerful. I think it's often we ask staff to make so many sacrifices for the mission, and you lose sight of the fact that you're not actually carrying your mission and values and how you're managing your own team. And I think you called out a bunch of really specific examples that are great. We will definitely link to the N10 technology equity guide in our summary too, because I think there's a ton of great advice in there. One question I just want to be sure to pull back on from Bonnie that came up in the chat is specifically for smaller nonprofits. And I think the question here is getting to also like, how am I supposed to negotiate? And I'm a small nonprofit, like what should I be negotiating on? What's in my power? Or what should I be thinking about? Mark, have you seen any successful practices here that you can start us off with?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would start out by saying I love this question. There's a lot of new platforms and vendors out there now that are changing up the whole model, right? There's no contract, right? There's just transaction fees. GiveButter comes to mind, right? They're kind of blowing up the industry when it comes to that. And guess what? When you go to the pricing page on their site, there's actually pricing there. So that's amazing. So while it might not be free, you should pay for receiving a service, and that it's a per transaction type of thing. So every time there's a transaction comes through, there's something that goes to merchant services, the credit card company, Stripe normally, or whatever it might be, and then something for a platform fee. But those are often also kind of taken care of by donor covered. The donor actually covering the transaction fees in addition to it. So I think I'm not really answering the core question there, but I would be a little bit, you might be getting something, if you're beta testing something, you might be getting it for no cost or, physical money cost, but you'll be spending a lot of time. And just realize there's a lot of other low or no cost options out there that don't require you to have some kind of 3-year commitment.
I'll take a stab at this. Yes, Bonnie, negotiate. I've seen, when I work with my clients, when we're sort of in the final selection, what is this thing going to really cost me phase, I often give advice to organization leaders who are doing this negotiation thing, because that's really between you and the company. a consultant shouldn't really sit in the middle of that. But some common places where I've seen there's a lot of products out there. There's a lot of interest in getting you to use their stuff. And the best time to do it is when you're negotiating a contract. Go to them with everything at one time. Don't ask for one thing. They say yes. Then you ask for the second thing. They're going to get annoyed and they're not going to want to continue that. So think about everything you might want to get more for the same amount of money. So we want more training sessions for the same amount of money. We want more records. We want more administrators. It's easier to get them to give you more for the same cost often than it is for you to say, actually decrease the price and give us more at the same time. Although I am seeing lots of success with people really negotiating different costs. This is what I can pay. I got $5,000 a year. If you can get me to that with the things that I need, I will sign that contract. So just think about it. I'm a poor personal negotiator. Like, oh, the car is this much. Sounds good. But I'm really good when I read a contract, kind of helping people find the space without really being abusive in what you're asking. There's value that you're getting. And there needs to be a fair exchange. You want to be good partners, especially when you first start out. But yeah, run those numbers and ask for more, and often you'll get it.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate to the audience here, if you've got other questions, we definitely open to them for the last 2 minutes here. I've still got lots more that we're not going to have time to cover because this has been great. One thing, and I know I saw Tony chime in the audience there, and it's something him and I have talked about before, but for folks that are at an organization that's larger or maybe a little bit older, that isn't so ripe for change or interested in technology, especially younger people, I think this comes up a lot where I hear them be like, oh yeah, that tool sounds really cool, but I'd never get anyone to do it. What's most effective to kind of change attitudes, especially if you're kind of at the losing end of that power dynamic internally at an organization? And maybe Erica, you want to take this one first?
Oh, this is a tough one, especially when I think about like sort of, social service organizations where the technology and like the platform use is just, people are overburdened and they are having to put into so many different kinds of like funder mandated proprietary systems, and they get nothing out. And it's like, I'm already drowning. I can't believe I have to like think about a new system. I've already been doing this for 20 years. And so like, yeah, there's people resisting. And I think it's just, you gotta like think about, what is that carrot? Is it like the people are entering data all the time, but like not learning anything? They don't really get anything in return. They don't really understand what they're doing and where and how and for whom. And if that's the case, then like maybe the carrot is this new technology is going to actually give us insight into the work we're doing and the impact it's having. And that's what everyone wants. But yeah, it's going to take some more work and you're going to have to learn a new system and you might not want to do that. So it's tough. But where's the carrot?
Yeah. When you brought up carrots, one thing that I've heard before is from an organization that I know well is they throw a party. They throw a party whenever there's like a new tool adopted or they found a new piece of technology, and they literally have like cupcakes. And it's like they just totally changed the attitude from one of dread to like something to be celebrated. And food is an amazing motivator for people. And it just like brings your team together. So that was a fun, tangible tip that I loved.
I'd also say the magic words to leadership are increased efficiency and growth without adding new staff, if those two things are true. If you've got, to Erica's point, if you've got database administrator or someone who is spending a lot of time entering information into multiple places, it lets them do higher level work. Let the tech do the things that the tech is really good at doing. And I would try to figure out what the no is actually coming from. Often leaders who make these decisions are very far removed from the use of these tools. You don't have to bring them into your third circle of heck, living in legacy systems that are not working for you anymore, but help them understand what you're going to be able to accomplish if you've got a better tool. Like paint that vision for them.
One thing I'll add too with that is being able to like be open and honest about the change, but also I think a lot of times with my own experience with working in nonprofit has been that there is very little wiggle room for failure or for anything that like smacks of things that may go wrong. And I think if you enter into it, and back to the question of I forgot who asked it in the audience, but how do you get folks to like turn that corner when you're doing that change management piece? Why are we not building in and also acknowledging that there will be failure? A lot of times organizations and nonprofits will talk about, I'm a lifelong learner, I learn all the time. Well, how the hell are you learning when you're not even acknowledging or building in the capacity to fail in a safe space with a new product? And so I think that's the larger thing, is how do you get people's soul is to take the pressure off of saying this is all or nothing type of thing. If you all fail, if you enter something wrong into a wrong cell, it's going to like completely turn the organization completely upside down. Take that away. Acknowledge that this is a sandbox. If you're in beta testing, acknowledge that this is something that's going to be clunky as it gets rolled out. And I think that will take the pressure off. It won't take all the pressure off. You'll still get the people, you'll still lose people that are just resistant to change, and that's just the nature of the beast. But one thing I would say is like making a big part of your sell to your own people is building in failure and acknowledging it and accepting it and embracing the process to review and learn from the failure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tristan. I think that is such an important component of technology succeeding, is like anything else new, is the capacity. Like, if people are afraid to say something doesn't work or flag that there's issues, you're never going to end up succeeding with the tool. And one other question I'd be curious about related to failure is like, okay, so maybe you went through this process and you picked a tool, or maybe you jumped into a new role and they're using something and you're like, oh no, this is not going to work, or I made a bad choice. Where's the emergency exit sign? What's the best way to acknowledge that there was a mistake or something's not the right choice and move forward? Maureen, I don't know if you want to take that one first.
Oh, it's the worst. It's totally the worst. I think you have to just name it and be open to hearing the feedback that you're going to hear if something that you thought was going to fly doesn't fly. And I'll link it back to Mitch, the very first questions that you asked today about the evaluation and selection process. If you follow a decent process, the likelihood that things are going to bomb just gets decreased. It's not completely reduced to zero, but it's a manageable tolerance of bump or failure. And I think that that's important. If you are going like this or picking based on budget only, it's the cheapest one out there, you aren't really going to have that project selection story to tell when it's time for you to do an autopsy on what worked and what didn't work, and what lessons have you learned, to Tristan's point, how are we going to make sure we don't do this again like that?
Yeah, and I think when you have an organized process as well, everyone's on the same page about if it fails, because you've set up a standard and you've kind of set up what the test is. And so it's not a scary thing. And I think that's another big piece of failure, is like just a quantitative, clear, universally accepted assessment of like, this is the test you're running, it didn't do this. And so now, there's no animosity around that or blaming or finger pointing. I think that goes a long way in that culture of failure, is that it's a part of the framework and structure. I think we've got time for one more answer if anyone wants to have the last word before we time out here. No. All right. Well, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the questions and the amazing advice and guidance. Like I said, we'll have a recap. This session will be available immediately afterwards. And anyone here that's on Pond or wants to join Pond, make sure you fill out that survey just so we know you were here and we can credit you. It's here on the screen. It'll also be on our webinar page, linked to this session. So thank you so much to our panelists. Everybody check out, follow their work. We'll have links to all of them in the session notes too. So thank you so much to everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.